Shalom Aleichem, and welcome back everyone as we, Baruch Hashem, have another opportunity to learn together as we prepare for Parashat Acharei Kedoshim. Parashat Acharei, the Ben Ish Chai learns on a pasuk there a very interesting idea. It says in the pasuk as follows: V'zarak haKohen et hadam al mizbach Hashem, that the Kohen sprinkles the blood on the Mizbeach of Hashem. V'hiktir, I'm skipping a few words in the pasuk. V'hiktir ha'chelev l'reach nichoach laHashem. And he burns up the fat on the Mizbeach as a pleasant aroma to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Asks the Ben Ish Chai, why does the Torah choose blood and fats? Like, this is the two things you got to do with the korban. You got to spray the blood, you got to sprinkle the blood, and you got to burn up the fats on the Mizbeach. This is the Ben Ish Chai's question. And the Ben Ish Chai explains it with the mashal. This mashal is a famous mashal. I'm sure you've all heard it in the past. So if you haven't, it's good. If not, if you did hear it, it's even better. So this way you can remember it and say it over. There was once a businessman. He had a store. But he wasn't all about the money. He also wanted to learn some Torah. So every morning, he would stay in the Beit Midrash a little bit longer, and he would learn. And his wife went to the store, and she opened up early. And one day, a man comes into the store, and the wife's there, and he says he wants to buy a huge purchase. He's going to spend a lot of money, but he wants to speak to the owner, not his wife. So she says, I'm sorry, my husband's in the Beit Midrash. I cannot bother him, he's learning. He says, if you're not going to call your husband now, I'm leaving, I go to a different store. Her husband comes in the afternoon to the store. He says, no, what happened? She says, a rich man came, wanted to buy for thousands of dollars, but I told him you were learning in the Beit Midrash, can't bother you. And this man says to his wife, listen, if someone comes here and wants to do business, and such big money, you call me. Of course you call me. Okay, don't worry about the Beit Midrash. You call me, I'm going to come. She says, okay, I got it. If someone comes for business, I'm going to call you. Not a few days go by, and now comes to this man's store, when the wife opened it early in the morning, was one of the IRS agents, one of the tax agents, one of the people collecting taxes. And he comes there and he says, listen, where's the owner of the store? She says, why? Well, the guy owes me like thousands and thousands of dollars of taxes to the government. I'm here to collect it. She says, oh, big money you're here for. Okay, no problem. She sends a message to the yeshiva, sends a message to Beit Midrash, and she tells them, my husband needs to come immediately. There's a big, big business transaction about to happen in the business. So this man hears it. He's like, what a wife. What a good wife. I told her to call me and she's calling me. He closes the Gemara and he comes running to his store. He comes running to his store and he is expecting to see someone that's going to make a big money. And who's the person he sees there? The IRS tax agent. And he looks at him and says, yeah, how can I help you? He's like, well, I'm here to collect $50,000 in taxes. After he finishes talking to this guy, he tells his wife, listen, if they're coming to collect money from me, you don't call me. That's the last person I want to speak to. You have to know which one to call me. Says the Ben Ish Chai. The Ben Ish Chai says, we have two midot. We have two types of character traits. This is the idea that every character trait can be used in the service of Hashem. So sometimes you wonder, how could two character traits on opposite ends be in the service of Hashem? So says the Ben Ish Chai, to do something quickly, with the zrizut, fast, alacrity, something to do fast, that's a great midah, right? But that's when it comes to mitzvot. You have to use the midah of running fast to do something when you're coming to do mitzvot, good things. What about the midah of being lazy? Right? You know, lazy is not a good thing at all. Shlomo Melech says that a lazy person, his house falls apart, and he doesn't bother fixing it. Right? The Mesilat Yesharim says, when a person is serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, How do you show Hashem that you want to do that mitzvah? That you're really excited to do that mitzvah? If you do it lazy, it doesn't show that you're really excited to do it. If you do it quick and you really want to do it, you do it with excitement, that shows that you really want to do it. You know, they say, Shlomo HaMelech says that the house that falls apart, the lazy man's house that falls apart, he says, what type of house is this? He's talking not about a regular house, he's talking about Shalom Bayit, the peace in the house. Right? You look at this. Newly married couple, right? Yes, there, of course, right away, I make sure it happens like this. Right? First year of marriage, hopefully everyone's on their toes. And then as life progresses, right? What happens? Do I have to do this right now? Can I wait till tomorrow? Can I wait till next week? Right? It loses it. That's. If you want to show your spouse that you really love them, you show them by whatever they ask for, whatever they're needing your help with, you're doing it right away. Same thing when it comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When you're doing the mitzvot of Hashem, how are you doing them? But says the Ben Ishchai, laziness is good. You have to know when. When is laziness good? When it comes to do avirot. Yitzhak comes says, let's go fight. Let's go hit. Let's go watch something that we're not supposed to. So what are you supposed to tell the Yetzer Hara? I'll do it later. Later. We'll get to it tomorrow. We'll do it next week. We'll push it off. That's the time you're supposed to be lazy. Says the Ben Ishchai. Blood and fats. Blood represents doing something quickly. Right? The blood is pumping. It's rushing. The adrenaline is going. And fats represents cold and laziness. Because you know why we bring both of them on the Mizbeach? Why we bring them up on the Mizbeach? Mizbeach is kapara. It brings atonement. Do you know why? We're making an atonement for how we use our midot. Because how many of us, when it comes to averot, our blood is pumping, adrenaline is going, and we're running to do the averah. And when it comes to mitzvot, lazy, it's tired, I'm not in the mood. So says the Ben Ishchai, we have to make a kapara on that. Because we're like this foolish person who's calling the husband, holding the owner for the money that he owes, but when the money comes in, he's not calling. You're messing up when to do what? This is why we bring the fats and the blood on the Mizbeah. We're saying, Hashem, please make a kapara for us. Because why? From now on, we're going to get it straight. From now on, as we're preparing, as we're marching from Pesach to Shavuot, and we're learning Perkei Avot, and we're learning how to be better people, we're telling Kadosh Baruch Hu, we're going to use the midot, we're going to use the character traits right. When it comes to laziness, we'll use it for Avirot, we won't be lazy. And when it comes to mitzvot, we'll do it with blood, with our blood pumping, with our blood rushing, with excitement. This is our first lesson on this week's Parashat. As we continue in the Parsha, we have in Parashat Kedoshim, we have a pasuk that tells us that Betzedek tishpot amitecha. You have to judge Betzedek tishpot. With righteousness, judge your fellow man. Betzedek tishpot amitecha. Right, the Gemara in Shavuot, it says, what does this mean? Either the judge has to be very careful, or it means you have to judge everyone favorably. Dan lekav zchut. Right? Dan lekav zchut, D-L-K-Z, Dan lekav zchut. This is a very important thing, to judge everyone for the benefit of the doubt. But then, 2 psukim later, the pasuk now says, Hocheach tochiach et amitecha. Rebuke your fellow man. So 1 second. 1 minute you're telling me, judge him favorably. And then the next minute you're telling me, rebuke him. Which one is it? Right? Judging favorably means when I see him doing something questionable, I come up with answers why it's okay. And then it tells me I have to rebuke him. So do I have to judge him favorably, or am I supposed to rebuke him? Which one is it?
Rebuking is not judging, it's not the same.
But so which one should I do?
Rebuke.
But it says to judge him favorably. 2 psukim before it says B'tzedek tishpot amitecha. 2 psukim later it says Hocheach tochiach et amitecha. Rebuke him.
Rebuke with love.
Says Rabbi Gavriel. Listen to this, Rabotai. Rabbi Razner here says, Amitecha. What does Amitecha mean? Well, in English it means comrade, your brother. Betzedek tishpot amitecha, hocheach tochiach et amitecha. You have to know how to do it. You understand? Listen to what they say over here. You have to be able to alter your attitude when you see someone, right? I see someone doing something wrong. So what's my first thing? The guy is a shagitz. The guy is terrible. No. You have to be down the kafschut here. You have to say, you know what? Maybe he doesn't know. Or maybe he doesn't know what he's doing. That's not him. He's really a good guy. Maybe something's happening right now to him that he's acting this way. You have to first be able to perceive them differently. You have to have down the kafschut that this guy is not evil. This guy's just doing something that may be wrong, right? At the time, but he's not an evil person. And if you think that, right? If betzedek tishpat amitecha, if you think that nicely about him, you're down the kafschut that you're saying that he's really a good guy, then, like Rabbi Gabriel says, now you can give rebuke. Why? Because now when you give rebuke, like if someone tells you, you bad, you don't listen to them. You close them out. You're not listening to them. But if the guy tells you, you're great, you're good, you should do something a little bit different, do something a little bit better, it's more accepting. It's more easier to take. More easier to take in. And Rabbi Rossen here says the story. There was an American rabbi, Rabbi Eliezer Silver, who was serving the United States Army as a chaplain after World War II. And when he was in the DP camps, right, the displaced persons camps, where all the Jewish refugees, other people who survived the war were gathered, he came, he was the rabbi there, he was bringing in Sefer Torahs, he was bringing in books, he was bringing in Talitim, he was setting up classes and stuff like that. And there was one person in the displaced person camp, in the DP camp, that had nothing to do with religion. He stayed away from everything. So Rabbi Silver walked over to him and said, why? Rabbi Silver asked him why. And he said, you know why? When I was in the concentration camps, there was one Jew who had a siddur. He smuggled in a siddur. And in order to use that siddur, people gave him a whole loaf of bread. Whatever ration of bread they had, whatever the slice of bread they had, that's what they had to give him. He charged the whole thing. And people gave it to him. This guy who had a siddur, instead of doing mitzvot, he was taking people's bread and eating it for himself. If this religious guy can do it with his siddur, I want nothing to do with religion. And says Rabbi Silver, why are you looking at it that way? Why don't you look at the other way around? How many people were willing to give up their bread in order to pray to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? How many people were willing to give up the little meager portion of food that they have in order to pray to Hashem? You have to know how to look at the situation. You have to know how to look at what's going on. All right? There is a story here that they bring down. It's by Stephen Covey. In his book, The Seven Habits. He tells a story of traveling one Sunday morning on a subway in New York. He says everybody was sitting quietly, people were reading newspapers, people were all doing their own little thing quietly. And all of a sudden, a man with multiple children comes on the subway car. And the children are loud, and the children are making noise, and they're running around the subway car. And the father, he's just sitting down with his eyes closed on one of the seats. And the people were all looking, this and that. And Stephen Covey says, I was sitting right next to him. And after a couple minutes, I had enough of it. So I knock him and I say, hello. Don't you see what your kids are doing? Could you possibly control them a little more? And he says, that man at that moment lifts up his eyes. And he says, oh, you're right. I guess I should do something. We just came from the hospital where their mother died about an hour ago. I don't know what to think. I don't know what to do. And I'm sure my children don't know how to handle it either. And Stephen Covey says, you can just imagine how I felt at that moment. Right? Our job sometimes is not judge immediately. It's rather, look at the situation bigger. Right? Tishvot. Betzedek tishpat amitecha. Judge everyone favorably. Look at them nicely. And then if you do that, you'll be successful in rebuking them. Because if you look at them nicely, you speak to them nicely, you won't come off thinking you know better. Because you really don't know where anyone comes from. You don't know what everyone's dealing with. Nobody knows each other's packages. A person can look fine on the outside. Meanwhile, he's dealing with pains and demons in his mind and in his body that you don't know about. how could we ever judge them? I'd like to move on to our final lesson from this week's Parsha. We have, in the Parsha, it tells us a very interesting din. It tells us that Lo tikom velo titor et bnei amecha ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. It says, Lo tikom velo titor means don't take revenge and don't bear a grudge. Okay? Don't take revenge and don't bear a grudge. Now, what's the difference between these two? What's the difference between taking revenge and bearing a grudge? Shirashi says, so imagine Reuven and Shimon. Reuven says to Shimon, give me your hammer. And Shimon says, no. And the next day, Shimon comes to Reuven and says, lend me your scissors. And Reuven says, I'm not going to give it to you, just as you didn't give me what I asked from you. This is revenge. Now, what's a grudge? If Reuven asks Shimon, can you lend me your car? And Shimon says, absolutely not. And the next day, Shimon comes to Reuven and says, can you lend me your car? And Reuven says, of course I give it, because I'm not like you. That is called a grudge. Okay? So that's the difference between revenge, I'm not doing it because you did it to me, and grudges, I'm not doing it, I'm giving it because I'm not like you. Now, the Torah says over here, don't do it to who? Et bnei amecha. To your people of your nation. So the Kli Yakar asks, why is that? Why not to the people of your nation? Why not to everyone? He says, in fact, that's the truth. You're not allowed to do it to anyone. Not only the people of your nation. You're not allowed to bear a grudge. The grudge and revenge is not just, remember, it's not just doing it to the other person. It's what it does to you by taking revenge and by what's it called, bearing a grudge. It destroys you also. So it's not just to our people, it's to anyone. So why does it say it this way? So the Kli Yakar says an amazing explanation. He says, imagine, he says, you have children. I'm going to update the mashal a little bit. But imagine you have your child. You went to the beach with them. And they're playing in the sand. And they make a sand castle. Beautiful sand castle. And they spend 4 hours making it, right? And then your child comes to you and says, Daddy, look. I made the sand castle and it has a tower and it has a window and it has everything. And as he's showing it to you, a couple of other boys run over and they smash the whole thing down. So what does the father do? You're the father. What do? You start screaming at the two boys? Yeah, you. Or do you tell your son, it's beautiful, but it wasn't going to last anyway forever. It's a sand castle, the sand comes, this and that, And you explain to him that the realities of the world is that a sand castle is a sand castle. You're not going to go crazy on it. If a father gets up and starts to beat the other two boys, you should call the police and put them away. You don't beat up someone, you don't cause a whole ruckus because of a sand castle. Says the Kli Yakar. That's the truth all the way around. He says, when it comes to money, what's money in this world? Hashem gives it. It's all from Hashem. No one can do anything that's not from Hashem. If a person is coming and ruining your money, you're doing something like that, it's like someone ruining a sandcastle. Yes, it's great and it's big and it costs a lot of money, but at the end of the day, it's all temporary. It's all here today, gone tomorrow. It's not something to go crazy about. Therefore, he says, the Kli Yakar, the only time you can take revenge, as it says, El Nekamot Hashem. The revenge is for Hashem. What does that mean? He says, when they come against you being Jewish, if someone's starting to destroy your soul, that's when you have to take revenge against them, not let them do that to you. That's what he says to Kli Yakar. Now, it's amazing that the Kli Yakar says this. The Kli Yakar, his name was Ephraim, and he was born in the city in Poland, if I'm reading it correct, Lunchitz. And he was a student of the Maharshal, Rav Shlomo Luria. The Kli Yakar was very famous. The Kli Yakar, by the way, is an Achron, right? So he's in the late, 1600s? And late 1550, we think he was born. He's 1600, so it's like, 400 something years ago. If you take the Mikrot Gedolot, right? The Mikrot Gedolot, he is one of the Achronim, one of the later sages whose commentary is found in the Mikrat Gedolot. Not everyone's commentary is in there. A lot more commentaries. They're not all found in the Mikrat Gedolot. He was a very, very holy Jew. But he wrote the Kli Yakar. Why did he write the Kli Yakar? 1 year, he got very sick. And the doctors told him he's dying. And he made a promise to Hashem that if he survives, he's going to write a Pirush, a commentary on the whole Chumash. And he did. He wrote many Sfarim. He has Olot Ephraim. He's very, very many interesting Sfarim that he wrote. But the Kli Yakar has an even more interesting story that comes with him. His father, Aaron, was not such a wealthy person. And he once got into trouble with the local pirates, with the local counts. He borrowed money, and he wasn't able to pay it back. And back in the olden days, they had, you couldn't pay back money, you ended up in a dungeon. You borrowed money, you couldn't pay it back, you ended up in a dungeon. You couldn't file Chapter 11 of bankruptcy and you were done with. No, it didn't exist. And Aaron and his wife, so the Kli Yakar's parents, were thrown into the prison, into a dungeon. And the wife was screaming and going crazy, and she was unbelievable. She didn't know what's going to be. And she was pregnant with child. She was with child. And the local count didn't care. He threw them in the jail. And the Kli Yakar, and not the Kli Yakar's father, Aaron, was davening. And Hashem answered them. One of the guards in the dungeon, Johan, one of these Polish people, he came and he started giving them food secretly. But you can imagine, Aaron's wife, the Kli Yakar's mother, started to get bigger and bigger. And in time, she needed to give birth. And again, to give birth in a home is already dangerous. To give birth in a dungeon without any doctors is even worse. And she was in crying and she was in pain when it was time to give birth. The miracles of miracles, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Johan felt really bad. He gave them much food and everything he could. And he went to the count, the local pirates, and he said, please, let them out. And during this whole time, the wife was telling to her husband, Aaron, how can this be? How come you're so calm? And he says, how can I not be calm? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in charge of the world. Hashem will take care of everything. And the pirates had a change of heart, and he let them both go free. But he kept the baby to himself. True story. He let Aaron, the Kli Yakar's father and mother, out, and he kept the baby for himself. And he raised the baby as a Christian. The Kli Yakar, first 13 years, he was a Christian. Didn't know he was even Jewish. And the story goes that when he was 13, he started to hear voices at night that were telling him, you're a Jew, run away. You're a Jew, run away. And he couldn't easily run away because the pirates had him protected, watching him. One day he was able to get away, and he ran to the Maharal of Prague. And the Maharal of Prague took him in and treated him like a son. And he became eventually known as the Kli Yakar, one of the greatest scholars of his time. Now, the Kli Yakar is the only one who can say such a pshat. That when something goes on in the world, it's just money. It's just nothing. Hashem's in charge. You have nothing to worry about. Don't go crazy. Don't take nekama. Don't bear a grudge. Why? Look where he came from. His father, the whole time that he was in prison, was calm. He was serene. He was calming down his wife. He was saying, everything's from Hashem. Everything's from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If we go with this idea, if we go with this mahal, if we go with this life set that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was in charge, that everything comes from Hashem. There's no reason to bear a grudge. There's no reason to take revenge. All it's going to do is going to ruin you. You're just going to get more upset, and you're going to become more bitter, and you're going to become more problematic. The person who did it to you has already moved on and doing his next thing. He doesn't even care what he did to you. It's time to move on, as the Kli Yakar says. Your mama, money, what money? It's temporary. It's here today, gone tomorrow. The most important thing is to know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in charge. So to quickly review, our 3 lessons from this week's Parsha was the first lesson that you have to know when to be lazy, and you have to know when to act with zrizut, with alacrity. The second lesson in this week's Parsha was that in order to give rebuke, you have to love them. You have to look at them nicely. You have to give them the benefit of the doubt. Understand there's a lot more to every person than we ever will know. And when you talk to them Talk to them with the ability that you believe in them, that you want them to change for the better. Not that you're trying to put them down. And our third lesson, don't bear a grudge, don't take revenge, don't ruin yourself, but rather know it all comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we be zocheh to take these lessons and apply it to our lives. And with this, I want to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom. Toda rabah.